Hi and welcome back to Garden Ninja for the March garden tour. The sun is out, spring is in the air and there's absolutely loads going on in the garden. So come and join me as I show you what I've been up to in March here at Garden Ninja HQ. Let's get cracking. If you've not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, make sure you hit the red subscribe button below, where you'll get access to over 120 garden design hints, tips and hacks. And best of all, it's free, so subscribe today. Now I want to show you the herbaceous perennials that I cut back earlier this year, and I tend to cut back all of my herbaceous stuff late winter, but a few of you online felt a little bit scared and timid about doing it in your own gardens, and I think that's because you're taking off all the old growth and it feels like you're being really brutal. But have a look down here. If we go into a squat, you'll see, and I'll do a close-up, that we've got all of these herbaceous perennials already bouncing back to life. The Molinia grasses behind me I've already started to tuft out. We've got some Achillea here, got Lady's Mantle, Rudbeckia, and all these herbaceous plants that I brutally cut back to the ground because all of that dead growth, it's gone. There's no point trying to hold on to it. And by cutting it back, you let all this fresh growth out every spring. The borders look tidier and your plants will be far healthier. Take a look at these little baby fennels. So this is last year's growth. I cut it back because it gets really woody. But all this baby growth is going to spurt up this year and create a wonderful fennel. So a number of you were also asking for an update on the Cornus or dogwood that I hard pruned back last winter. Now take a look at it now, here it is. If you've watched that video, you'll know that I pretty much cut this back to the ground and I showed you exactly how to do that. But a year later, and all of a sudden, we've got this reinvigorated shrub. And the reason for that is twofold. The first is that Cornus are a really vigorous shrub. They love to grow and they respond really well to a hard prune. But the second, which not many people seem to realise, is that if you imagine this old Cornus has established this huge root ball under the ground, it's got this vast network of resources. So by hard pruning it, it's still got all those resources and it simply funnels those into new growth. So it's really worthwhile if you've got an old, gnarled Cornus, giving it a hard prune. Now some people will hard prune the Cornus every year, but I find it a bit cruel because it takes so many resources. So I only prune mine every 2 or 3 years. But if you've got an old Cornus that is looking wayward and rather shaggy, check out that video because within a matter of 12 months, you can have a really nice open fresh Cornus like this one behind me. Now at the beginning of the video I said that spring was in the air and this is no exception. This is a forsythia and there's a few dotted around the garden. And I want to kind of make a case for this shrub because a lot of people say it's really boring and then in spring it's really garish. But I argue the opposite. There's hardly any shrubs at the moment that have this amount of flower and impact. And if you've got an awkward spot in your garden, maybe an awkward corner, or you're trying to screen off an ugly shed or a neighbour's structure, forsythia and similar shrubs are really good bang for your buck. And the reason for that is, in spring, you get these insane displays of colour, but for the rest of the year, they're covered in green foliage. So whilst they're not the most exciting shrubs for most of the year, they act as good screens. And then in spring, they return the favour of you keeping the slightly boring aspect of them for these. And I just think they're fantastic. So who's Team Forsythia? Do you love them or do you dislike them? Let me know below. Now, it's not all sunshine and meadows at Garden Ninja HQ. Sometimes we have disasters, and I'm sure you at home will have had trials and tribulations, plants that didn't quite work, or in this case, a plant bereavement. Now this is a Calicarpa, and I planted it here because it has amazing autumn berries. They're bright purple, and it looks like something out of a Japanese manga book. However, last year and the year before, it was looking a bit peaky, didn't really do much, and I suspect that it's pretty much dead. So I'm going to show you a quick way as to how you can check if your shrubs are alive or dead, other than the obvious, they've not got leaves. But if you take a sharp pair of secateurs, and I'll do a close-up, you scratch away part of the bark. If it's bright green, you know it's still alive. If it's brown and dry, you know it's dead. Now, you need to be careful that you don't scrape all the way around the stem because you could kill the plant, but you just need to scratch off a little bit. And sadly, in this case, it's definitely dead. Another way to test is to take one of the laterals. If you bend it and it snaps like that, then you know it's completely dry. When I look at that, there's no living tissue. So this one has to go. There's another one over there that's also suffered a similar fate, but I'm going to show you a plant that's going to take its place that's going to be just as fabulous. So if you have a look down here, we've got this little beauty, and it's an Artemisia Meadow, which is a bit of a mouthful. It's also known as a southernwood or a wormwood, and it's actually a really old herbaceous plant, used in all sorts of fascinating ways, such as Aperol, Campari. Other drinks use this botanical to create a really unusual flavour. Also, the drink absinthe is created from some form of Artemisia. Now, this variety is quite rare and it grows to about 1.5 metres by 1.2 to 1.5, so it's going to form a big bush shrub. However, it's not evergreen, so it will lose its leaves every winter, but you get this gorgeous silver foliage and these beautiful flowers from around June to July. So I'm going to try that in the space of what was the Calicarpa and see how we get on this year. What I always try to do if I'm removing a dead shrub is to save as much of the soil that's been around it, because you don't want that just to go into a compost bin or a waste bin. It's all good stuff, so be quite vicious, but I use a sharp trowel and knock off as much as possible. I mean, I can see how root bound it really was. It never really took off. Right, so we've saved all of that good stuff. That's my dead shrub. So I've dug out the old shrub and I've got this really nice free draining soil here. So I'm going to knock the Artemisia out of its pot, like so. Now here's a good example of a root bound plant, look at that. So what I need to do is tease all of those away, because if I just pop it in like that, the roots continue to go round and round and it takes a while for them to break free, which means that it takes a while for them to establish. So I'm going to free them up now, like this, set them free, liberate them, and then pop them in. There we go. To freedom! Okay, dig out some of this. And with all plants, you just want to bury to the existing level. You don't want to overfill or cover the existing level of the plant. So you put it in so it's level with the soil, and then you compact it just by hand. You don't need to jump up and down with your feet or do anything crazy with them. So that one's in there, and I know it's going to get to like a metre, so it will fill this space nicely. But because this is more of a shrubby plant, it's probably going to grow up and out. So the chives and the alchemilla and other bits and bobs around will all kind of sit nice and harmoniously. But I need to water this in now, and that's key no matter what time of year, whether it's raining or the soil is wet. You always, always, always need to water in your new plants. So let's take a look at the Wildflower Meadow. And if you've been following my vlog over the past year, you'll know that last year I started this perennial Wildflower Meadow and I detailed absolutely every step that you would need to take. So here it is behind me. It looks very much like a blank lawn, but let's take a closer look and I can show you exactly what's going on. So take a look down here. Now this is a Jacob's ladder, and I grew these from seed, and it's a perennial wildflower. beautiful blue flowers. Now, because I did the cut of the meadow last October and now in March, this has emerged and the grass isn't too long that it outcompetes, so this has a fighting chance. And as it grows up, it will self-seed all the way around the meadow and there'll be like an equilibrium between the grass and the wildflowers. So I've just finished the first cut to the meadow, and you do that early spring, and what that does is it basically evens out all the competition between the wildflowers, grasses and other native plants, so they're all starting from the same position. If you don't do this first cut, the grass usually takes off first, it will overtake the wildflowers and you end up with more of a lawn than a wildflower meadow. If you followed my guides, you'll know that we cut it between 2 and 3 times a year. Once now, early spring, the second either late August or early September, and then the last is the last cut of autumn. So it's a really easy way to cover a large area of your garden in wildflowers without having to spend every week mowing it. Now have a look down here at these. These are actually winter aconites, and they should have flowered around January, but because of the weird weather patterns they're now popping up and we're nearly in April, so they probably won't flower. But it's important that I leave them here because all these leaves are going to photosynthesize, which means they'll send loads of energy back down underground ready for next winter. But it just goes to show how strange the weather patterns are. So here we are at my infamous Granny's garden border, and it's full of cottage favourites such as clematis, delphiniums, we've got loads of roses, we've got lupins, asters. But last year in autumn I showed you how I was pruning my climbing rose, and this is it behind me. So I'd thinned out a number of the branches that weren't developing a strong framework, and this is one of the main branches. But as you can see, we've got all this fresh growth, and this is where the flowers will come from. So over the next few weeks, as this gets taller, what I'm going to do is train it. So I will lean these sections over, which will then cause buds to break further down to send more upwards growth. So you're basically training it over for upwards growth, which then flowers. And by doing that, and moving these over, we're going to get loads of flowers this year. So I've been asked a few questions online this month about how to properly naturalise bulbs and spring flowers in a lawn, and how you can get around things like mowing without killing them. So I'm going to give you an example of that now. I've got a load of bulbs naturalised in the lawn behind me. What I tend to do is I naturalise them around deciduous trees so that they're kind of kept contained in these drifts. And it means that as the leaves are off the tree and the spring sunshine comes through, they can go into bloom. And then in the summer, the trees provide a bit of shade, which helps keep in some moisture. But the reason why I plant them in these sways is that I like to mow around them, leaving what I call grass islands in the lawn. And it may sound a bit bonkers, but I'm going to show you that now. And what that means is that you can leave the bulbs to flower, the grass will grow up, softening the edges, making it feel really natural. But then you don't have to run the risk of mowing over them, because you want to leave the bulbs as long as possible so they can gather all that energy from this year, ready for flowering next year. So by putting them into these little islands and leaving them alone, you get a really soft look and the best of both worlds. So that brings us to the end of the March tour here at Garden Ninja HQ. If you've liked this video, please make sure you subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, because I've got over 130 garden design hints, tips and hacks to help you and your friends make your gardens awesome. I've been Garden Ninja, happy gardening.